Hey everyone, MilkmanAl here. Now that we've got all the information for the Path of Exile 3.15 Expedition patch, I figured I would go through and detail some of my thoughts about what we can expect and what this league will look like. There clearly have been lots of giant changes, many of which people are pretty unhappy about, so I wanted to give you my thoughts and see what you thought about how this patch is going to go. Before we get into this, though, if you enjoy this video, please give me a like, subscribe here, and follow me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/milkmanal1, usually about 8 to 10 p.m. Central Time. So, let's get to it. So the first and most widely advertised thing that was going to happen with this patch was nerfs, right? Chris Wilson was very upfront about things being nerfed, and man, he was right. Holy crap. Damage across the board got slashed. And I think it's way worse than anybody expected. I believe Chris mentioned that skills overall, 6-link skills, would be cut by about 40%. I'm seeing people mention as much as like 70%. It's huge. The damage reduction that we're seeing is just totally unprecedented. That said, that was probably necessary in my opinion. We were seeing people just totally trivializing in-game content with, moderate investment in their characters, and I don't think that should be possible. It's really not all that fun in my mind. Perhaps some people will still find a way to do that. I think it's pretty possible. But, at least making that impossible to do on anything but a totally outrageous budget would be ideal. So with that in mind, I did kind of want to talk about a few of the particular nerfs that they made. One of which was my beloved Archmage. That's probably the most famous one so far. And man, they just rocked it. It sucks. It's gonna be really hard to use. However, one thing to consider is that this number, the supported skills gain added lightning damage equal to percentage of mana cost. Now, that's only 60%, but given how much the mana cost multipliers have increased, 60% of the new total is probably not that big of a change. In some cases, it might actually be more. So I'm not too worried about that, about Archmage being a viable support. I think it'll still be something that we can use. What you're really going to have to watch out for is mana regeneration. Mana regen is going to be a huge problem for this build. Archmage previously sort of thrived on Arcane Surge, being able to grant that flat percentage of mana regeneration, and since that is no longer the case, we're going to have to figure out other ways to make that work. One of the ways that we could probably benefit from being low on mana is using the new Mana Bond skill, which I think is actually kind of a clever way to turn Archmage builds into like 2-button builds, so you have like 2 main skills that you can use. So that's kind of a silver lining, but yeah, Archmage it's not happy these days. It's not happy. The other thing that I thought was very confusing was their treatment of controlled destruction. So if you missed it, controlled destruction went from 100% decreased chance to crit strike to 80% less chance. So it's a multiplier now instead of simply a reduction of your crit chance. And that is like totally untenable on crit builds. There's no way that you can use that. And interestingly, it's also untenable on elemental non-crit builds, because usually those builds are fairly reliant on elemental overload to generate their damage. And you can't do that if you're not critting. Like, those skills are going to crit like 1% of the time. That's totally unreliable. So basically, they've pigeonholed control destruction into just being used for chaos skills, and I don't really understand that. Like, my interpretation of GGG's goal is to like increase diversity in builds and make everything on a more level playing field, decrease the outliers. And that's exactly what they aren't doing with a change like that. Similarly, their change to making supported skills cost mana, while sort of understandable in some like some configurations, like with cast when damage taken. And I know that they were aiming at cast on crit builds, which is sort of unfortunate because those are pretty high effort builds in my opinion. But one effect of that is it just totally eviscerates Spellslinger. And I personally thought Spellslinger was in a pretty good place. It was usable. It was kind of niche, not super strong, but something kind of cool to do with your build and an interesting way to get combos going. But now you basically can't do that. The sacrifice is just too high, and maybe you can get by with that in like the story, the campaign of the game. But I think after that, like you're gonna be wanting to run auras, and you just don't have. Basically, the opportunity cost of running Spellslinger is not worth the convenience that it offers, and that's a shame. So again, it goes against my understanding of what GGG is trying to do. The mana situation in general, though, I don't feel like is the doom and gloom situation that most of the more popular streamers are kind of making it out to be. It's certainly going to require change in how people construct and build their characters, but outside of maybe some like changes to auras that you run, it's going to encourage a lot of like different thoughts on how characters need to be managed in the endgame. So in particular, I think that Eldritch Battery is going to make a comeback. I think people will use that as a method of very easily rechargeable mana, and it'll help people get the skills, get the auras that they want, in addition to being able to cast these more expensive spells. So we'll see how that goes. It's a strategy I'm planning to use. So we'll see if it catches on. So there are obviously other changes that have been made, but for the sake of brevity, I just wanted to skip right to a response to sort of the public reaction to all of the patch notes that Chris Wilson issued earlier this morning. So I'm not going to bore you with this whole speech here and going through what he said. Suffice it to say that if you are a Path of Exile fan, which presumably you are if you're watching this video, this is worth a read. If you haven't seen it yet. It's on Reddit, it's easy to find. But, like, I understand where he's coming from, and I agree with most of his points. But unfortunately, I think he missed the points that a lot of people were trying to make. And I wanted to highlight the top comment here by user Irradium, and I will just read his quote. So the thing is that many players feel like you fixed the part that you, Chris, felt unhappy with, which is power creep, while not fixing the part that we, players, felt unhappy with, which is untelegraphed one-shots, tedious Atlas progression, item inflation, etc. If there was an address toward the latter, the patch might have been perceived better. And I 100% agree with that. In particular, I feel like feature bloat is the worst part of this game. There is just too much to do. There's like paralysis through choice. And, clearly having some variety is nice, but when it takes so much effort to get into and through the end game, it makes the game less fun, in my opinion. Especially when you're foregoing other content deliberately to try to get through a certain aspect of the game. Like, I will use myself as an example. Like, I don't think I'm really a casual player. I probably put about 150-ish hours in per league, and I hardly ever get anywhere near endgame. Like, true endgame. I haven't fought Maven. I don't think I've ever fought Awakener 8 Cirrus. Maybe once. Most leagues, I've fought Cirrus a couple times, maybe 3 times. I don't really ever get to Uber Elder, very rarely. Shaper, occasionally if I want to. But basically, these things aren't accessible to me just because there's so much to do. And, if I decide that I want to go for Uber Elder, that's like a week's worth of playtime for me. That's something that I actually have to like dedicate several sessions to. And that doesn't feel good. To know that you've like gone through like a third of the end game progression with that amount of time invested it just sucks. It feels really bad. Um, and I think they need to address that. There's just too much stuff going on in the game, in my opinion. Um, so even if like you have to go in with this mindset that you're just going to skip certain things because if you don't have all day to play the game, there's just no way you're going to get to it all. I generally have time to get through, 2 to maybe 3 characters per league, like, get them into their 90s and do some solid in-game content on them, but that's it. It's just not realistic for me to get much further than that. And that sucks. It just sucks. It doesn't feel good. So speaking of things that don't feel good, I know Zizarin in particular and several other streamers have raised the issues of chase items being watered down. And that, as someone who found an Awakened Brutality maybe 2 leagues ago, and that essentially funded my entire league, that was like half of the, worth half the currency that I found the whole league. Like, to have that suddenly be worth way less because it's much less desirable gem, that's awful or brutal. Haha. uh, it just like that can't happen. There needs to be multiple tiers of chase items that you can attain, because I will never realistically get a Hate Forge or a Headhunter or something of that level, or like these ridiculous like mirror tier crafted items. I will never have those things. So to like eviscerate all of the, or a huge chunk of the items that are kind of like 1 tier lower than that, like your 10 exalt, 5 to 10 exalt items, like that sucks. It makes the end game grind much more of a chore when your rewards are fewer and further between. I think that's a huge mistake on GGG's part. Toning down the Awakened gems, and hopefully they revert that. But we'll see. So that's all doom and gloom. So let's follow it up and finish on a positive note, right? I think the new skills are fantastic, and I think that actually GGG has done a pretty good job of bringing the current metagame down. You're not going to see as much cast on crit. You're not going to see all the Archmages. Maybe their methods for doing those things were not exactly the most well thought out, but they've achieved those goals, I feel like. But in addition to that essentially bringing a lot of other options to the forefront, we've got all of these new options to build around. And I say that in an unironic fashion. I believe that you can build around basically every single one of these options. Like, they all open up really interesting possibilities. And I would like to highlight just a couple of them, but I think Battle Mage's Cry is great. Like, we've seen, repeatedly with builds with like Mjolnir and Poet's Pin, using triggered skills and things like that. I think this is going to be very similar to that, and like I think we will find some really, really just awesome broken builds to make with Battle Mage's Cry. This goes a long way towards GGG's goal of making the Inquisitor actually like a viable like attack / spell casting character. I think that's really cool. I dig it. Good for you guys. So with like Shield Crush, Explosive Concoction, anything that sort of like flips the script on its head is something that I'm all about. Like using offhand damage or unarmed damage, super cool. I like it. So my league starter is going to be Forbidden Right. We will see how that goes. I think I'm probably going to do just like a boring ED Contagion Occultist. Maybe use Spellslinger if I can swing the mana for it, but we'll see. I might go Totems with this. If you can get Totems to a point where they can survive more than 2 or 3 casts of this, then it'll probably still be just fine for clear speed. So I'll give that a shot as well. I'm gonna be the sort of piss on the parade guy here and say I'm not really very excited about Summon Reaper. I think it's a really cool looking skill, and I think it's a neat idea. But it sounds extremely passive, and it doesn't sound like you can add this to like your army of minions very easily, because it's gonna like kill your minions. But I think it's kind of a neat idea. We'll see how it's executed. Maybe I'll change my opinion once I actually see like gameplay with it. But I don't know. It's I probably a cool in concept, not so much in practice sort of thing in my mind. And last but not least, Voltaxic Burst. Totally dig this. The like elemental conversion to chaos and corpses exploding. Like, what's freaking cooler than that? Um, I think that this is going to be a very very useful item or useful spell for lots of different classes, and I foresee this being something that you can build around very very well. So we'll see how all of that goes. I am very much looking forward to this league start, despite all of the weirdness surrounding the nerfs and skill changes and functional changes to the game. I still think it's going to be a lot of fun. I am optimistic that the league will be great, as I always am. I hope that you guys join me when I'm live. I know there's lots of other people who will be streaming as well, but I'm going to have a good time too, damn it. So come join me. I will be on as much as possible. Typical time is like 8 to 10 p.m. Central. Again, have an awesome league start. I am MilkmanAl. Please drop me a like and a subscription, and I will see you later. Thank you very much for watching.